I want to go speak in Columbus, Ohio. I want to go to Louisville, Kentucky. I want to go to Owensboro, Kentucky. I want to sit in a room and I want them to have to tell me that I'm not a human being. And I want them to hear the stories about what our meetings look like. How beautiful it is to walk down Market Street with a bunch of people that don't necessarily look like you. How great it is to walk into a building and see all kinds of people and not be afraid.
Welcome to the Commonwealth Club World Affairs of California. I'm Michelle Meow, a member of the Board of Governors for the club and also producer of the Michelle Meow Show, which some of you have been here for. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I think like most of you have been trying to find my words, and so I don't have much other than I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. I feel so lucky and privileged and honored that I get to be with some of the most incredible human beings in the world who are doing work day in and day out for all of us. I'd like to give big thanks to folks who have made tonight possible and on such very short notice. San Francisco Pride has graciously sponsored the reception tonight. Yes, thank you, San Francisco Pride. San Francisco Human Rights Commission, Robert Holgate, Alaska Airlines for keeping the lights on tonight for us. Without further ado, I would like to introduce to you, we're going to do some quick welcome remarks here. Mo'oli Tabuli from the Human Rights Commission.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mo'oli Tabenyo. I'm the acting director of the Human Rights Commission. Don't worry, I'm going to be dealing with this name for the rest of my life. So thank you to the Commonwealth Club for having us here this evening. We really appreciate all of you in the audience as well coming in for this important conversation. So the Human Rights Commission began in 1964 on the backdrop of the Civil Rights Movement. In 1975, the city added the LGBTQ Advisory Committee. And here we are in 2024, preparing to grapple with another 4 years of a Donald Trump presidency. I've been with the city for a little over 10 years, and during the last Donald Trump administration, it was my experience that the city did a great job of responding to all of the chaos and hate that was thrown our way towards the immigrant community, towards the trans community. And I can assure you that the Human Rights Commission will be right there at the table and leading the city's response along with, all of our elected officials and making sure that all of our rights are protected here in San Francisco. As a recent somewhat new queer parent, all of these issues are more important to me than they have ever been. And so I just wanted to come and offer a few of those words and introduce some folks that are really on the front lines and protecting our community and been at it for a really long time. My friend Roma Guy and Annie Herrera.
So good evening, everyone. And I'm very happy to be breathing with you with all the turmoil that's going on. And so I was invited to share the welcome. And I think the reason is because I'm old, O-L-D. And I hope that I've learned how to be O-L-E in the process. And that's what I'm hoping we can all find amongst ourselves tonight. So when we started going through the election at the federal level after Obama and then the whole Trumpite thing getting real traction, as somebody who's an avid reader of American history, I thought, oh, damn it, we're going back to 1850. And I still believe that the surfacing of white supremacy and separatism on all these levels has taken hold again, and it's the same and different at the same time. So we are the resistance to that. And in short, what I've learned in my efforts to be OLE, when I had black hair instead of white hair, that I learned that how people learn how to change and take risks to change, because it's very difficult, is you have to listen to the people and yourself within and amongst the people. And then you have to see how you have learned to believe what you believe, meaning the culture, which at its center is the arts. And that's where the heart is. You cannot leave that out. And I'm not saying that just because you're here. I said this when I had black hair because of my own background. And thirdly, at the center is that's when you hear and build coalitions or consensus of some form with the heart. That's when you can work to change the structure of American history. And to me, that's the way I found it. And then I found my place in it. And I got to be 82 years old so far. There you go.
Thank you. Gracias. Primeramente, buenas tardes, buenas noches. It's great to be here. My name is Ani Rivera. I am my daytime job. I am the executive director of Galería de la Raza, an organization that utilizes art and culture as a means to convey and portray the social change we want to see in our communities. It's a pleasure to be here. I think in the last, week and 3 days, has it been 2 weeks? Tomorrow will be 2 weeks officially. It has been a moment of reflection. I think that today what I want to offer is sort of how I've been navigating and the thoughts that have been coming up in the different conversations we've had. And one has been really centered around deep reflection. You know, we have a long road ahead of us. And this is not just change within the federal government, right? That is one piece. I think it's important for us to be looking at what happened to the state of California and also what's happening here locally in San Francisco and how all these, we are shifting, where like there's shifts, there's new waves coming in, and how will we sort of land? It is important to acknowledge that this election was not just about the federal government and who's coming, but it's also in our state. We couldn't pass the increase of minimum wage. We couldn't repeal, rent control issues. We couldn't, we made felonies. Now they're felonies for certain crimes and drug crimes. Those are real issues that have been plaguing our communities since day one. And I say communities. And I think part of that reflection is also going to require us to be in very deep allyship with every sector. And that means reaching across and working with different communities to understand what this next 30, 40 years is going to look like. As a cultural worker, I think it's also important to be thinking about how we are going to undo the damage that has been done by this rhetoric that has been harmful, and we are not investing into telling our true stories and to sitting with the uncomfortable issues that got us here, like racism, like misogyny, like in a city and county of San Francisco, Dreamkeeper Initiative is still being under attack. And these are the deep issues we have to sit and wrestle with if we're going to imagine a world that's going to be just and for all of us. So I leave with in these conversations we've had, one of my colleagues, the San Francisco Foundation President and CEO, Fred Blackwell, said a comment in one of the meetings and it just really, it's about acknowledging that these things happen in cycles and we've been here before. And he quoted a really important kind of value that we see in the Black Panthers. You cannot lead the people unless you feed the people. And that is still the work that every day in this coalition work that we see ourselves or that we engage, some of us that engage, are doing. You have to do both and envision, think about the policies, and yet feed and care for the people that are here, struggling every day. And as a queer woman, you know, I'm glad that we passed same-sex marriage in California, that it's been changed, that the language has changed. But how does that help my brothers? How does that help my cousins? How does that help my uncles, my mother, the working class? And I think we need to be thinking about those issues as we think about sort of a queer agenda. Last thing I want to say is stop centering just 45. It's not just him. It's been conditions that were created that allowed him to get here. And when we keep just centering him, we ignore all others that, you know, got us here.
Can I just add one little thing, please? So, you know, at the beginning of our country, 6% of the people could vote. They were all white, and they all had to own property. So that is still where the struggle is, you know? And so we have to remember that none of us would be sitting here if we hadn't had a struggle. Unfortunately, there are no miracles apparently in the human species. So we have to we're here to do the work in our lifetime, and whatever we can all do is what we can all do. So I thank you for being here, and let's go to work.
And can I add one more thing?
Yes, ma'am.
It's okay to also hold the fear, the angst that we're all feeling.
Yeah, right.
It really is.
Yeah.
I think it's important. It's about our humanity, acknowledging where we are.
Yeah.
And that we have to make space for that to be part of the conversation.
Yep.
And that not everyone's going to be able to be in the
No.
room of meetings and thought and envisioning. Some people just need to be right now cared for, and that's okay too.
Absolutely.
So, thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Buenas tardes a todas, a todos y a todes. Thank you for all being here. Thank you to my siblings, Okan Sengun and Juan. And I would like to start this conversation or this panel, because this panel is about immigration and the intersectionalities that immigration and LGBTQI issues, but in particular trans, intersex, and gender diverse immigrants community are facing, or how we can actually digest a little bit more that fear, that sadness, that anger that we all might feel, and the reason that we are here, right? So thank you all for your presence. Thank you, Okan. Thank you, Juan. And I would like to start with some introductions. I would love to ask to each one of us to introduce yourselves, your name, your pronouns, the title, and the organizations that you work with. So I'm going to start with Juan. So if you can start with your introduction.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us here. I'm really grateful to be here on stage virtually with the two of you. My name is Yuan. My pronouns are she and they, and I'm the executive director at Lavender Phoenix. Lavender Phoenix has been in San Francisco, been in the Bay Area for 20 years as of this year, and we organize transgender, non-binary, and queer Asian and Pacific Islander people around issues of safety, healing justice, and trying to build a more vibrant movement for all of us. Yeah, I'll pass it back to you, Nicole.
Thank you so much, Yuan. And I'm going to pass it to you, Okan.
Hello, everyone. My name is Okan Sangun, he, him pronouns. I'm the co-executive director of the Center for Immigrant Protection. Our mission is to empower LGBTQIA plus immigrants by ensuring their safety and well-being while celebrating TGNCI plus identities and providing accessible legal services in their asylum applications and basically fostering a community of light, love, and unity in the United States.
Awesome. Thank you, Okan. And once again, my name is Nicole Santamaria. My pronouns are she and we. I'm a proud indigenous from El Salvador. And I am the executive director for ELA para Trans Latinas, the only trans Latina led and run organization in San Francisco Bay Area and the entire Northern California. So that being said, the first question that I have for you is, how are you and your communities doing after the election results? Okan, can we start with you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, well, post-election, LGBTQ plus immigrants, especially asylum seekers, are experiencing increased anxiety about potential changes in asylum policies. There is a strong sense of urgency and concern about how their cases might be impacted by maybe stricter enforcement and policy shifts under the new administration. However, we tell them, we immediately made statements and talked to our clients, and we tell them, please be aware that current asylum applications and processes will not be affected immediately. Like it can take time. And we as the staff and board at the Center for Immigrant Protection, we will continue to closely follow the changes in immigration laws and policies, and we will keep providing a safe space for you all.
Thank you.
I really appreciate that. Nicole, is it okay to go ahead?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that our answer to that question is simple and devastating too. I think that so many people in our community woke up the day when we had the election results feeling fundamentally alone and feeling deeply terrified. At its core, the election results nationally are sending a message of tens of millions of votes, tens of millions of people who have made a choice that reject our fundamental humanity and our fundamental safety. And I think so many people in our communities know and remember so closely what this meant for us in a previous administration. It meant mass deportations and the threat of that for Latinx, for Southeast Asian, for other communities. It meant so-called Muslim bans that targeted Muslim communities. And it meant constant attacks on our folks that have only grown in the past 8 years. But I also want to offer that in the week and a half since the results first came out, I think I've heard from our members and our staff that people have also felt strengthened by each other in perhaps a way that is different than when we were incredibly surprised in 2016. I've seen staff and leaders in our membership really facing the feelings of grief and disappointment rather than avoiding them. I've seen folks really immediately working to understand the strategies, the messaging that have resulted in our enemies' wins, our opposition's wins. And we've already started, as folks have already mentioned, to launch into action thinking about how we protect each other and how we make sure we're not in a similar position in 2026, 2028, or 25, 50 years down the road. And I think that this moment, even this past week and a half, is deeply reminding me that beyond one electoral win or loss, beyond a statement or a slogan, beyond one cycle of a policy win or loss, our communities are in a deep need for lasting political homes where we can not only receive or look for the services we need, but be with other folks who are, for our trans, queer, folks of color, immigrants, refugees, the children of refugees, and making sense of our moments together so we can face it in a way that develops power.
Beautiful said, Juan. Beautiful said. I would like to sing those words, right? Because I think that in everybody here can agree those sentiments of feeling alone sometimes, and in anxiety, sadness, grief, which is, rooted in our prior experience with this administration or Trump's administration in the past. And in that line, I would like to ask you if you can remind us, how was for our communities that prior administration? Because I think that it's important that we look the history, as Roma said, the history of this country. So how we can tie up the links of the history, not only with the prior administration, Trump's administration, but other administrations that have been targeting and persecuting immigrants in general, and now another identity, which is the trans, intersex, and gender diverse identity. So could you please do a summarize or remind what in your communities was the worst impacts?
I'm happy to do that, for this group. And I think it's a really right question to think about, because you're right to say that we are not just facing the conditions of the second Trump administration. We're facing the aftershocks of decades of consistent condition change in the way that immigrants are treated and seen, cared for or not in this country. I think that, in the last Trump administration, all of those attacks on our immigrant and refugee communities and more were happening. But I think the aftershocks have been felt through the Biden administration as well, right? We haven't necessarily, although immigration policies and in some ways the communication coming out of the White House has changed, we actually haven't seen a substantive improvement in the way, in particular, undocumented folks are treated in this country. And in some parts of the country, they've actually been treated far worse, provided with far less. And I'll also say, a lot of the attacks on specifically, for example, Southeast Asian refugee communities in the Trump administration have really changed the dialogue about the way that our communities are criminalized across both sides of the aisle. Even through the Biden administration, our communities have still had to face threats of deportations against Southeast Asian folks who came here as refugees or the children of refugees when they were 2 years old. 3 years old, surviving and escaping the effects of American wars, and are being threatened to be sent back to homelands that they've never actually lived in and can't remember. So I think that, those really harmful policy directions and sentiments have continued. We see on the horizon the potential for worse. I also want to name that after 2016, I think for so many folks in our community, it was really an electrifying wake-up call. And our membership, like the membership and also client load of so many organizations, really exploded in that moment. From 2019 to 2020, we wanted to better document and understand in numbers what are transgender Asian and Pacific Islander folks experiencing in the Bay Area. And we surveyed over 200 folks with more than 100 questions. We found that the stress of constant transphobic rhetoric, transphobia that's present in our systems and structures, and also anti-immigrant sentiment, it was contributing to conditions where our folks were no longer seeing their survival at times as possible. Where at one point, and with one question, more than 2/3 of the folks who responded said that at some point in the past few years, they had considered ending their own lives. We were facing losing beloved people in our community in so many different ways. And we knew that it was up to us and up to a lot of our partner organizations to fight to create real community safety and healing. I think so many of our projects around community safety, around peer counseling and healing justice, around youth leadership development, they started in that first Trump administration. They continued to be, and if not more relevant and maturing as projects during the Biden administration. And I think, like the work of a lot of our community partners, they will continue to be necessary in the next few years as well.
Thank you, Yuan. Okan?
Well, I think how I would describe between 2000 and, the first Trump administration was, I think just one word just comes up to my mind, it's chaos. It was chaos. We would wake up, go to the office, and then see which of what the new policies that morning that he tweeted out is gonna make how many of our clients ineligible for asylum to stay safely in the United States. In the previous Trump administration, they implemented a policy called last in, first out, which refers to a practice where the most recently submitted applications are processed before all the applications. So all the old applications, they all of a sudden went into a black hole. So this reinforced the backlog on pending applications, and that had psychological tolls on asylum seekers who have already been waiting for an interview day for a long time. They also implemented budget cuts for USCIS, which led USCIS being understaffed and more backlogs. And also, they did not want to give work permits to people who have a pending application here in the United States. So they changed the 100. So if someone applies for asylum, they can apply for their work permits 150 days after the initial submission. Trump changed that and said, no, you have to wait 1 year, 365 days instead of 150 days. So that wait period for just a work permit, which is extremely important in an immigrant's lives, right? That raised, that affected our clients or the immigrant community mentally, physically, and financially too. So again, it was a chaos.
Thank you, Okan. And I would like to, for example, to add a little bit about as an immigrant from Latin America, one of the most impactful memories that I do have, it is the separations of children with their parents, right, at ICE detention centers. Children from Latin America families that are still missing, that we don't know where they are, and the contradictions that this pro-life and safety, that this rhetoric is trying to portray a Christian, a religious, and pro-life movement, that it is a rhetoric that is in deep contradiction of the actions that we have already seen. And the deep impact or hatred against women. And when I say women, it is women with all different paths of lives, with body autonomy that affects trans and cis women. Right, and for me, that is something that is still continues. And also it is important to mention that deportations, incarcerations in ICE detention center, it is not a new issue or a new struggle for immigrants and refugees. Every single administration has targeted immigrants. In particular, trans immigrants from Latin America, because it is the most close borders that we have. So no wonder the fear that we have been mentioned here, when the first day and the second day of the results, if you walk the mission, and you can still walk the mission, a mission that it has been historically Black and Latinx community, it was empty. It was empty, it was silent. And still you continue seeing the mission in that kind of pause, in that silent. Because in one way or another, this history still is present in our minds and bodies. And maybe we don't remember with thoughts, but our bodies does. Our body does. So in that sense, I would like to give another question. What is the future? You as an individuals, and also these questions is for the community present here and the people who is seeing us in different platforms, right? But what is the future that you are envisioning for our communities? Okan, would you like to start?
Yes. Well, the next 4 years will be difficult, but despite everything, as the Center for Immigrant Protection and I think as the community, we are not hopeless. It will be definitely extra fight for sure. I mean, we could use our energy for progress, but yet we're now just getting ready to fight setbacks. However, we should keep reminding ourselves that we are a very strong network and community. And I always tell people that you are not alone. We are here, the community is here, the organizations are here, and we are a well-organized community. So I think that would be my response.
Yeah, thank you for that, Okan. I think that it's hard for me right now to think about our future without thinking of the contest for power and safety that it takes to win the future that we want. And I think that if there's anything this election cycle has revealed to us, it is that across every major issue area that progressive people are concerned with in this moment, our opposition and our enemies are the same. And I think that, common misconception in a conversation about LGBTQ or trans immigrants, for example, could be to say, that's such a specific sliver. What a specific intersection. That must be just a few people, when actually we are on the front lines of every single major struggle that all of our communities are facing right now. So, I think that many of the same forces that are, that have led to folks in our local community. I think of Banko Brown, a young transmasculine Black person who was killed last year for shoplifting, in San Francisco. I think of Jackson Salas, a young Filipino gay man who was found dead in the home of a stranger and who was told by the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in the Sheriff's Department that investigations into lives like his weren't necessary. I think many of the same forces that led to their lives ending prematurely, to them becoming ancestors too soon, to the people around them being dehumanized and unsupported in life, are many of the same forces that are targeting our immigrant communities right now and trying to deny us of our humanity. So I think that I want a future where Jackson and Banko can be alive. I want a future where the children that, Nicole, you were just speaking about are with their families, are supported, are loved, are known. And I think getting there will require two things. We are going to have to fight and scrap to help our communities survive, not just the next 4 years, but the next 10, 20, 50. And we are going to have to look into the far future and plan like the right-wing plans, plan like the far-right plans, to craft a world where progressives, where people who believe in the sanctity of trans life, where we can be a dominant political force and moral force in this country and in this world.
In a future where immigrants or migration is not criminalized, a future where there is no more ICE detention centers, no more ICE, period. So that's some of the dreams, right? The act of dreaming together and bringing our stories to put it to work, that all the atrocities that has happened already don't happen anymore. So how safety looks like for you guys? Yuan?
Yeah, thank you for asking. That's really big on our minds right now, and a lot of our work is around community safety. One of the first things that comes to mind is from 2017. I think a lot of folks here might have been living in San Francisco, working in San Francisco at the time that Trump's executive orders around the so-called Muslim ban came into effect overnight. And I think, like Okon mentioned earlier, just shocked and terrified people across the country, across the world. It was incredibly confusing. Folks thought, oh, will I never get to see my family members again? Will I ever have that chance to be reunited with the people I love, or is that gone now? And I remember, I think in more than 30 airports around the country, including right here in SFO, more than 1,000 protesters in San Francisco stopped traffic at SFO, made sure planes weren't getting off the ground, made sure that all the systems that could, if they were just running business as usual, were going to keep families separated from each other, weren't operating that day. And also, I think, made it clear to folks who were being detained in person that there are hundreds, 1,000 people in this city alone who were on their side. Obviously, we have to be able to do more than only the direct actions that interrupt the worst moments of our time. But I do think that moments like that can give people hope. Moments like that when ordinary working people actually stop the gears of the systems that are separating and isolating families, separating and isolating immigrants. And I know that so many of the folks who, were on the front lines of just that action that day are folks who are continuing to organize and lead organizations and volunteer for organizations who are doing the day-to-day work supporting immigrants. So, I think there's so many things that safety must look like in the coming years, but one of them is actually every single person, whether or not you are a immigration lawyer or a professional activist, to actually look at themselves and ask, what are the ways that I can interrupt systems and business as usual right now?
I remember that day. We were at the airport that day, and it, even under those circumstances, being with the community just felt great, and feeling that we were not alone in this journey. I think in terms of your question, safety for LGBTQI+ asylum seekers means secure legal status, protection from deportation, and fair treatment and fair hearings and asylum interviews at asylum offices and at immigration courts. It's about having confidence that their cases will be judged by the judges or asylum offices without bias because of their sexuality or gender identities. And that they have access to the legal support that they need to ensure their well-being in the United States.
Thank you so much, both. And I think that there are many questions that can start from these thoughts, from these conversations. For example, how community looks like, how hope, what gives you hope right in this moment. But the last that I would like to ask, it is a final message, a final thought to give to the community that are here present and online. Okon?
Well, I think I would have three main messages. Two of them will be legal, and the third one will be just overall my last message. The first one, it is critical if someone is here in the United States without legal status. If you know that someone is here in the United States without legal status, they will be in danger. So for those individuals, I highly recommend to go to an immigration service nonprofit, talk to an immigration attorney, and Maybe there are reasons. For example, there's a 1-year deadline to apply for asylum. Maybe you missed it. But there are some exceptions that you may not be aware of. So just make sure you get the proper legal advice and and if you are eligible, just file your application immediately. It is very important. So just make sure you submit your application. If you are thinking about getting married to a U.S. citizen, do it now and submit your green card application. If you are thinking about asylum, just do it now because things will change. And the second advice will be, if you have a pending asylum application, some of them, they have well, I talked about the work permits, right? Sometimes they delay the application. They don't apply for work permits. Just do it now. You are eligible after 150 days right now, which will change after January 2025. So just make sure if you are eligible, submit your work permit application. And if your current work permit application is for 2 years, file for a renewal because you will then get a 5-year work permit application. Just these two things are critical. And lastly, I think I would say that you are not alone. We stand with you in your pursuit of safety and justice. And, we're here to provide support. We are here to advocate for your rights, just to make sure that you are not alone and protected throughout your immigration journey. So I think those 3 things will be my last thoughts.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yuan?
Well, there's no one better, I think, to give legal advice than Okan. So I'm gonna, leave that there. But I think maybe to speak more to the themes of the evening as a whole, I just want to get across that the most threatening thing that we can do in this moment is to silo transgender issues and transgender lives. Because rather than being marginal, like some, high-ranking Democrats have claimed after recent election losses, or extremists, like we've seen the far right hammer home in the past decade, we are on the front line of every major issue. We are immigrants. We are workers. We're on the front lines of reproductive justice and issues of freedom and democracy. And so I know everyone here is here because you believe in the fundamental sanctity of our life. The right has chosen immigrant bodies, immigrant lives, and trans lives as their battleground. And there is no conceding that battleground. There is no pretending that our lives don't exist. We have to refuse every single call as trans immigrant communities to isolate our own issues. And we have to refuse every call as a broader progressive front to silo our issue. So I think trans folks, let's love each other and support each other to survive. And for our allies, we need you, and we will all need each other for our freedoms. So let's continue to fight. Thank you, everyone, for all the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Okan. Thank you, Yuan. And for me, I will say the last things for what I have heard from Okan. It is basically moving out of a strategy and not moving out of fear. Strategize, what are your needs? As an immigrant, as an LGBTQI, but mostly as a trans, intersex, and gender diverse person. Strategize, what are the next moves? If it is in legal terms, do it in this moment, right? But also the undeniable identity of our humanities are not negotiable. That human rights are not separate from trans rights, from immigrants' rights, from worker rights, for women's rights. We are not separate of this. And I think that at the end of the day, this time is the opportunity for us to rethink and reimagine how safety looks like, how community looks like, how we are gonna rebuild or build our safety and support systems, how we are coming together to face not only the next 4 years. In our indigenous tradition, we always say to keep the path for 7 generations after. So whatever that is gonna happen from now on, it is also the legacy that we are gonna provide for our future generations and for our LGBTQI, especially trans and intersex and gender diverse immigrant communities that are coming and that right now are under attack. So we are here, people who is present here and maybe many more that are seeing us online and are gonna see us later, we are gonna come together. And that's hopeful. That's hopeful. Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and introduce to you our next panel, the state of LGBTQIA.
Thank you again to Michelle Meow and the Commonwealth Club for having us and for hosting these conversations during this time. I'm a little out of breath carrying those chairs, girl. I am, to say that I'm happy to be here might be maybe a little bit of a misstatement, but there's nowhere I'd rather be right now than in this room of people with this group of folks that are on stage, because I think, when we're at home alone, thinking of, going through our feeds on Instagram and seeing all the craziness that is happening in our country right now, it can get really draining, it can get really scary, but it's really comforting for me to know that we have a whole bunch of champions who are out there fighting every day to ensure that here in San Francisco and here in California, that we continue to lead the way when it comes to LGBTQI plus equality. So thank you all for being here. I think I wanted to start this discussion with, an easy question of how the heck did we get here? I feel like that's a question that we're all thinking and people have their own theories about it, but can you talk a little bit about how we all got here? Amani, you smiled the biggest, so you're gonna have to take this one.
Oh my goodness. Such a pleasure to be here. Thank you everyone for coming out and spending your evening with us. I will say, I've heard a lot of things about how we've gotten here, and I think there's often an urge in a moment like this to figure out, where did we go wrong, or rather, how did you get us here? And that doesn't help us. And I think in this moment, rather than thinking about how we got here, I guess what I want to think about is, what is the best way we can handle this moment? And I think that part is really important, because there is a strategy. There are things to learn. I think we have learned some different things about our country and the people that we share space with. And we have to think about, what is our strategy about making sure that we can keep everyone safe? And I think that's what I'm thinking about right now. What can we do to keep people safe? We often find ourselves in situations where a lot of my work is very often talking to people that think a lot like me. And I think something that's really important is that we learn ways to talk to folks that don't yet think like us, because I think that's what the work is, And in this moment, I want to think about, what is a strategy, not for just talking to people like us, but how do we get in rooms so that we are changing hearts and minds? Because we're in a place right now where our wins are actually going to come from convincing people that they think like us. And that's a hard thing to do, but also we're right, and we're going to all be better when that happens. So I think we should go into this with confidence. So anyway, that's what I will start with.
I guess I would add that I completely agree. I mean, it does, in this moment, it doesn't help us to really think through what might have gone wrong. But I will offer that I don't think it comes as a surprise that we have all been advocating so hard over time for the things that we love and we care about and we're passionate about in the social justice movements that we are engulfed by every day. What we have done differently, however, is that one side has been united by a common cause, their hate for us, the hate for the things that we stand for, how we live, how we breathe, and they have been very calculated in arriving at a moment where they're united by that one thing, the ability to tear down everything that we have fought for. And where we have perhaps not gone wrong, I think our movements have done a lot of really amazing things, but we have done it in a very fragmented way and often at the expense of one movement or another. And so now more than ever, I would echo what our colleagues from the first panel said, is that we can't afford to move forward unless we are in lockstep. And that means every movement, not just LGBT versus HIV versus immigrants' rights. We have to find ways to communicate and collaborate better. And we have to find ways to learn from what others who have dealt with extremist environments around the world have every day. And that means finding trust in ourselves, finding trust in the people around us, cultivating the trust circles that we know in our own movements, in our own lives, across movements that we can, figuring out how to let go of the things that we cannot change. That is very hard, and that means letting go. It means grieving. It means being okay with grieving, but then it means as soon as we are ready, finding our pathway forward and finding the pathway that resonates with us. As individuals, we don't have to have all the solutions. I lead an organization. I will be honest, I don't have all the answers, but we can figure it out together.
I don't want to force anyone else to comment on this question. I think one thing that I will say is, I think it's the reason that I wanted to start out with that question is that there are people that are making assumptions about how we got here, right? And we have heard on TV people blaming trans people blaming things like immigration, people who, even within our own community who are like, I think we've just asked for too much and we've gone too far, right? I mean, that is something that I have heard. So I want to name that those things are happening. And yet I think what we don't often talk enough about is the fact that a lot of people did not show up to vote. Right? Like, we saw that Trump did not win by that many more votes than he got defeated by last time. And so there were a significant amount of people, most of them who are registered Democrats, who stayed home. And so what are we not doing right? How are we not getting those people to the polls? I think is a really important part of the answer here. I also think that part of the way that we got here is the outsized weight that money has in our elections. I think that both parties, unfortunately, have in some ways prioritized big business and money. And we've seen in this last election that the Democrats, kind of pandered more to the center right. And it didn't work, right? And then even when we think about the way in which we receive information, right? The algorithms that send us our Instagram and TikTok feeds, and the place from which many people, especially young people, are getting their news, the way that they are built and they are not regulated, and they prioritize monetization and what gets people to look at it the longest. And so it's all about rage and anger and fear and not about truth. So I think in so many ways, money has really gotten us here, the prioritization of money above people's needs and the value of humanity.
Thank you, honey, and thank you, my fellow panelists. I guess what I will say is, we got to figure this out. I feel like we missed the mark. I think when my husband and I woke up on Wednesday, the realization was that homophobia, misogyny, racism, transphobia has been with us forever, and we haven't figured it out. And we thought we were making moves, and we are making moves, but yet it wasn't enough. And I feel like we didn't do enough. And I think we thought we were. It was the same thing. We weren't linking the issues together. We still work in silos. I do believe that. It took us years just for the HIV community to actually bridge with the LGBTQ community. It took years just for queer people of color to be seen in HIV and LGBTQ spaces. And that's the work that we still need to do. And then beyond that, it's what my fellow dear friends and colleagues are saying. It's linking these movements. It's not just about these movements. It's about women's reproductive movements. It's about civil rights organizations, about anti-poverty, voting rights. We have to do that kind of work together. And I feel like we've been beaten down so much, and we try to organize, but we're not going to the next step. And we gotta do that.
I'm going to sound just like Imani, but with a little different twist. Since Tuesday night, I'm from one of those red states. I don't know if you noticed, but I'm white. And, I'm always trying to understand how my people could be so angry and not treat us as human beings. And what's the right message? How do we reach them? Because I saw some attempts by the Democratic Party, like the video where they were suggesting that wives could vote against the interest of their husband and not vote for Trump. And, that sounds, I'm sure some smart people in a room thought that was smart. Women from Kentucky did not want to hear Democrats tell them that they now have permission to go into the voting booth and vote for who they want. That sounded what they say about us being elitist, and we live in California, and we live these magic places, but we don't know how they live. I will agree with Imani. I'm tired of speaking in front of people that agree with me. Everywhere I go in the Bay Area, the crowd, they might be not educated on trans matters, but they wouldn't be there if they didn't have some kind of feeling that they support us. I want to go speak in Columbus, Ohio. I want to go to Louisville, Kentucky. I want to go to Owensboro, Kentucky. I want to sit in a room, and I want them to have to tell me that I'm not a human being. And I want them to hear the stories about what our meetings look like. How beautiful it is to walk down Market Street with a bunch of people that don't necessarily look like you. How great it is to walk into a building and see all kinds of people and not be afraid. And they don't know those feelings. Look, a lot of them are just evil people. I'm not gonna, but there are some of them. There are some of them that are having the same struggles we are. They're trying to feed their families. They don't have enough money to send their kids to school. There's no chance that their kids are going to have better lives than they did. The factories are gone. My stepfather and father signed on the dotted line, and if they showed up every day for 30 years, they could raise a family. That culture and society is gone, and they're afraid. And every time in this country when poor working class people are afraid, they divide us with race, misogyny, transphobia, and it works every time. Why are we not countering that issue? We have smart people. Why are we not figuring that out?
I want to pull that thread just a little bit further to say that there is also going to have to be a lot of strategy in thinking how we do use people who are on the opposite side of the issue to figure out how to navigate the next 4+ years. One of the organizations that Lance and I are deeply connected to, the National Minority AIDS Council, NMAC, where he serves as board chair, newly board chair, and AIDS United, where I chair their public policy council, have recently hired, over the last few years, a Republican strategy firm, which is painful to sit through. I mean, it is painful to hear their strategy, but they have been helping us trying to figure out how to navigate hard conversations with Congress that have gotten us through even the last several years of gridlock, and will be even more important as we think about how we navigate difficult legislative attacks on our rights and our dignity and the road ahead. And you have to enter those conversations with an open mind and then go back to the table and figure out what are the nuggets from that painful conversation that we're going to take and use, and what is just the rhetoric. But I think that we're going to have to rethink the entire playbook of how we operate.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that communication and messaging is something that is really important, and honestly, something that the left has had a problem with. I think that we, feel so strongly that we are right, but it is not enough to be right. You actually have to convince the other side of your argument, of your fight. We have to humanize ourselves, and in order to do that, the message has to get through. And right now, it's not getting through to enough people. We have such a great panel of folks right now representing all different parts of our community, from health services to legal services and community services. I wanted to ask you all, I think, what are we most concerned about over the next couple of years when it comes to trans rights or gender affirming care, HIV and AIDS services?
A lot. I'll start briefly to say that at San Francisco AIDS Foundation, we operate both a set of support groups for trans and gender nonconforming folks, as well as a trans care program out of our Magnet Clinic in the Castro. We partner with several other trans-led initiatives for young people and through city initiatives. And my worry is that at some point we're going to be told, here are your federal dollars, or you can keep providing these services to a group of your community that you care about and love. And we're going to have to make very hard decisions about the broader impact of our nonprofits and our mission and our ability to serve others, and be very creative about how we can do both, because the answer has to be that we will continue to do both. But that has very serious implications. I've spent the last 2 weeks working with my policy staff and leaders around the country trying to analyze the federal funding landscape, to understand how we might repurpose dollars that are coming in from foundations, corporations, and others that will continue to stand behind us. But I think there are real implications for funding that we're going to really have to think about, especially with the target on our back here in California moving forward. And then there's just a lot of logistics that our staff have really been thinking through. I think we're fortunate to be in California and have done a lot to create states' rights for the trans community, but folks are going to need to travel. They're going to need to do a lot of things that aren't in California, and there are real things that we need to think about: documentation, IDs, a variety of things that will have to help folks navigate even more so in the years ahead.
I can add on. I think all of it is at risk. I feel like we've known this. We've known that they've been coming for gender affirming care for years. But we've seen it happen, and so now we just know, we have to know that is, and especially for minors, trans affirming, gender affirming care for minors is at the tip of the spear. That is the bullseye. And immigrants. Nicole, what you said, immigration and trans youth, there's that. And then I do think what we know, because we've seen it for the past years, is the undoing of the Affordable Care Act, which gives us across the country for Medicaid expanded states the fullness of our health care, to realize the fullness of our health and wellness for our queer, trans, for folks who are living with HIV, all of that. And all of that is at risk. It's coming undone. We saw it happen with this Braidwood versus Becerra decision in Texas that's dismantling. It's going to happen. This preventative care that is going to get stripped away. And preventative care is about reproductive rights. It's about PrEP. It's about HIV. It's about saving us in many ways, and that coming undone, we will see. And then so in California, what I can see is then, of course, our undocumented folks who are covered by Medi-Cal right now. We have everyone covered by Medi-Cal, and that is going to be a target right now, to know that if undocumented folks are the target, then actually California and the beautiful, amazing fullness of our Medi-Cal system is at risk. And we have to do everything in our power to figure this out. And again, it's not just us. It's about everyone in our state. It's about joining together. It's about figuring this out with all the leaders from across the state, in Sacramento, community-based leaders, but government leaders, elected officials, all of that. We have to figure out how we're going to do that. And we're starting to, I do think. The issue right now is like, we can't wait. We got to do this right now, right? We don't have any time to wait anymore. The writing has been on the wall, and we have to get to work.
I would say the thing that comes up for me is I'm thinking about Scrimeti. So we are a legal organization, and so Scrimeti will be the first time that really an issue specifically talking about transgender folks is taken at the Supreme Court. And this is going to be talking about medical care. And basically the question before the court will be, are trans people treated differently in regards to medical care? And they, of course, are, because this is absolutely ridiculous. But one of the things that I like to talk about, I'm not a lawyer and I lead a law firm, so I think it's really important. And I tell my team all the time, I'm a regular smart person and I'm part of our community.
And a social worker. I mean,
Thank you, social workers. But we have to understand what's happening here. And I think this is an important distinction, because so often we start using language and we say the same things, but we don't always know what we mean by the same things. And so when we're talking about what this means for the type of care that trans folks are getting, I want to be really clear. The care that trans folks are getting is care that every single major medical association says is absolutely important. And this isn't easy to get. It's not some special care. It's not some magical special care. It is regular care that a lot of people get, because you know who gets it more than trans people is everyone else. And we don't talk about that, but to have puberty blockers, like, straight cis people get puberty blockers all the time, and we don't think anything about that. There's about 1% of the population who goes through something called precocious puberty, and that means that they start puberty early. It happens to about 1% of people, so most of us don't hear anything about it. And it's easily fixed by just putting someone on puberty blockers, and then when they're going through puberty and like when they're 12 or 13, then they're taken off. These are completely safe. That would be the same thing for trans folks. We know that anyone that doesn't have enough testosterone in any gender, that we can go and get that anytime. We know if someone is going through menopause or perimenopause, that they can have hormone replacement therapy with absolutely no problem. So when this exact same care is taken away from trans people, it is specifically to try to marginalize and alienate trans people. And that's what we need to think about in this moment. Because, you were talking earlier about there are people around us saying that we are asking for too much, or we're not asking for too much, y'all. We have to fight for our community. That is what we are supposed to be doing. And that's what we're seeing right now. We have to fight for our community. This isn't too much. People have to be able to have medical care. And the fact that we are thinking about who can have medical care, that is something that goes in front of a court, that's something we need to think about. Because I think often people say, well, that really doesn't affect me. But it does. If anyone can't have their medically necessary health care, then it's possible that you can't have your medically necessary health care. And that's how we have to start thinking about this. And in this moment, this is what it means to work intersectionally. And that means that we have to find folks that are experiencing the highest levels of marginalization, and we have to concentrate there. And that is where we need to put our efforts right now, because we know that our opponents are absolutely coming after trans people, trans kids, but also trans adults. This taking away this medical care isn't just for young people. It is for everyone that's trans. And so we really need to think about that and make sure that we are prioritizing people that are experiencing the highest levels of marginalization. And that's what it means to stay in community with folks.
And I love how she always does a better job of saying why NCLR does what they do for trans people, because it tries into everyone. And you always do that so well. 3 years ago at this question, I just would not have spoke, because I don't provide services for anyone. And sometimes I'm in discussions about budgets and financing, and I feel like, we just do this parade and a party, and maybe they're doing important work and providing services for our community. But I know now, after 3 years, that our platform, that San Francisco Pride takes care of our community here in San Francisco and the Bay Area. And being together on that day, and what we mean when we show up and when we work with your organizations to make sure we're putting up what you're doing on our platform, those are important. But I think now more than ever, we're going to wake up almost every day, especially trans people, And our feeds, that algorithm's going to say in Indiana today, they cut off care for trans. We're going to read something like that every day. And I used to, when I was in the other world, I didn't think about things like that, but now I know what that does to me. And I know that here in the Bay Area, when we wake up and we face that, well, I'm going to see Tyler that day, and he's going to tell me it's going to be okay. But the trans kid in Indiana, he is not. She is not. They are not. They are not going to encounter anybody that day that's going to tell them that it's going to be okay. But they might on their social media or TV, if anybody watches TV anymore. They are going to know that San Francisco Pride and this community is one place where we're not standing for what's going on out there. They're going to know that we're taking care of each other and that we're here and we're not going anywhere. And so it is important, and I think we know that more than ever this year. Our board is already getting ready. We know they're going to be watching to see what we do. And we're going to show up, we're going to be defiant, but we're going to have joy. We're going to find this and be with each other, and that's what's important.
Absolutely. And I absolutely believe that San Francisco Pride has a huge role to play in the months and years to come, because we are going to need to see that symbol of hope shine bright for people across this country. So thank you, everyone here, for the work that you're doing. We have a few minutes left for another question. So I think I want to ask at this time, is there a seed of hope in all of this for you? We've talked a lot about the challenges, the things that we're most afraid of, but what are the seeds of hope that you're taking away from this?
The seed of hope is here tonight. I started working at 7 o'clock on election night and saw the first results. I started writing our response. And I have just been surrounded by people that love me ever since that election. And I met with this woman named Marcy yesterday in the Castro, and she had her notepad out. She was writing notes furiously, and we were talking about what we were going to do. And I never felt so like I belong to something bigger than me, and it's not just trans people. It's all our community. And it's been hard these past few years to set at the head of San Francisco Pride, and there's been divisions in our community that hurt. Like, it really hurts to be and then hear that somebody's not going to show up at something you're trying to give to people, and it's hurt. And I think if any hope for me, as I see that maybe we can do some repairing within our community so that we can go do what we're supposed to, and I'm looking forward to that work.
Suzanne gives me hope. Hani and Tyler and Imani give me hope. The day after, Wednesday after election, I was not hopeful. I did write the email to my staff because I was concerned about my team at San Francisco Community Health Center. And then I went into the office, our health center, and literally a few hours later, I got word that one of our nurses who is trans had to field a call from a hateful person claiming to be our patient, threatening them, saying they were coming after them, they were MAGA, they were all this, and it shook us to our core. And then what I saw is our whole community at San Francisco Community Health Center embrace our team, love on our team. We came together in ways that we always do, but it meant so much more in that moment on Wednesday. And that made me hopeful that our trans folks, our team, and we have many folks across our several sites at our shelter at Tame and Booten and our Trans Thrive Center and our headquarters at Polk Street, but we took care of each other. And my team is still at work every single day. They never stopped. And so this gives me hope. I will say that, Imani and I get to work at creating change, and every year we assemble executive directors, queer executive directors from organizations across the country. We probably work with 100+ people every year, and it is a beautiful room of incredibly talented, smart, ambitious, inspiring folks, many of whom are super young. They're queer, trans, people of color, and they are leading our movement. And so that is giving me hope right now. That is out there, we're connected, and we are going to fight like hell. We are.
42 years ago, at right around this time, a one-office room opened in the Castro. It was the first HIV hotline that soon thereafter became San Francisco AIDS Foundation. And we formed out of a moment of fear and anger and uncertainty, but we formed because community came together when the government left us behind, when they didn't care about the pathway forward, when they didn't care about our lives, when they didn't care about our rights and our dignity. And it has been community that has gotten us through to such great heights. I mean, this past year, San Francisco only saw 133 new HIV diagnoses. We never thought we would arrive at this moment. And while I'm not going to make light that the road ahead is not going to be difficult. Make no mistake, it is going to be difficult, and we are going to have to fight, and we're going to have to be united. What I do know is that we have faced incredibly difficult political climates before, and what got us through was being united. What got us through was community, was loving one another, was the communication and the support. So what gives me hope is being the CEO of San Francisco AIDS Foundation, of being an organization that formed in a moment of grief and crisis and has achieved such amazing things throughout that difficult journey, and that I have such amazing colleagues that even on the hardest of days, I can reach out to or share moments like this, and I know that we will find a way.
You know, I would just say that there are more of us that believe in equality for folks. I know that we're saying that that's not what folks believe in, but that's not what everyone is voting for. I think there's a way that we interpret it that way, but that's not it. And we know that, you know, there are so many studies that show us just across the aisle that people want protections for LGBTQ people. We know that this is something that's true. And so right now, I've been calling it, this is our hero chapter. This is the time when you look back in the story, they're going to be looking at folks that are doing this work right now in this moment and say, what were we doing? Who were we looking at? And let's remember, you know, I was raised by people with a very different experience in the world. And I'm not going to say that we have been here before, but I'm not going to say that my parents didn't have a much more difficult time than I'm having in this moment. So we have folks that we can look to. We're doing civil rights work, and we have a civil rights movement. We have spaces that we can look to. There are books there we can read. There are people that we can learn from that have been in positions like this. You know, this is a really interesting time to start doing something with our movement. You know, before, when people were looking at civil rights, what they were realizing is that they were writing these policies. They wanted to enact these things, and then they realized that they didn't have people that were studying civil rights that would be able to roll them out. And so they encouraged people to go to school to become lawyers. And we can do the same sort of thing. Right now, I'm building a program at NCLR, and it's going to be really small, but it's going to be how we're starting a more intentional way in how we're doing our pro bono work. Because I think that in 10 years, it's going to look a whole lot different. If we're in a situation like this, I want to set the organization up so that we're better able to take care of our folks. And that's what we're doing. We are in our hero chapter right now. We don't see it, but when people look back in this moment, they're going to say, what did people do when their backs were against the wall? What would people do when they didn't realize what could be in front of them? And that's going to be what we're doing. Our community is the strongest, this is the most powerful thing that we have. This is the only thing that's ever won anyway. And we have that. That is what we are going to do. This is what we're going to move forward. And we're going to take care of our folks like we always have. We're on the side of justice. We are going to win this. We just have to figure out How are we going to show up when things get harder? And so while this is scary, this is also really exciting because we have an opportunity to make a mark on the world, to legitimately make it better, and we're going to be able to see that difference because we care about ourselves so much.
I feel like that's a perfect way to end this, so we're going to end it there, and we're, I think, having time to open it up for questions.
We will take a couple questions.
My question is very simple. I mean, this thing about transgender and transgender liberation, we were here before. I started transitioning in 1977. There was not even the word transgender. I'm one of the people that actually fight and litigate and did a lot of activism about Tom Waddell's clinic. Those doctors come to us on the streets as sex workers asking us how this thing works. What are you guys taking? What are you putting inside your bodies? So we were here before, right here, way, way back. So I know, I understand about strategy, stuff like that, but to me, as an old transgender, ancestor transgender, makes no difference. Because I would thrive, I would be silent, and I would be victorious at the end. Thank you.
Before I share my question, I just wanted to share a brief statistic because that will definitely help with this question. Before this Trans Day of Remembrance, we have lost 350 trans members of our community this year. 93% of them were Black or brown trans folks. 46% were sex workers. And so I'm just here to ask, what are we doing to protect our vulnerable community members who are already on the margins of an already marginalized community? What are we doing to protect our sex workers, people who use drugs, people who are experiencing homelessness, and the people who are actively going to face this attack on our community while we sit here in privilege and are able to share our thoughts and ideas in this room? I love the fact that I'm here being able to listen to y'all, but how are we protecting the people who are actively dealing with these discriminations?
I mean, I think that's a very big question. I can talk to a couple concrete things that we're doing at the Office of Trans Initiatives. I mean, one thing, you know, we have one of our staff members, Shane Zaldivar, is here in the audience. She does actually trainings with a whole bunch of organizations to ensure that, and city departments to ensure that they are culturally competent and can serve trans people. So in order to increase access for those people who are trans, who are homeless, who are suffering from addiction, that they can receive the culturally appropriate services that they deserve. In addition to that, right now we're working very hard on the Ending Trans Homelessness Initiative here in San Francisco. We have some community partners who are part of that initiative here with us today, and we really want to make homelessness for trans people functionally over, you know, in the next 5 years. So we are working very hard to ensure that we're providing more rental subsidies, that we now have the Tamon Booten Navigation Center for trans people, and you know, we've worked with organizations like Lion Martin to do guaranteed income pilots. So there are many, many different things that we are trying to do in order to address those very needs.
Yeah, I would just quickly add that through many of our organizations, we're providing access to social support and navigation and care services in the best ways that we can with the funding that we have. And we're thinking very hard about what increased partnership can look like so that if our funding is under attack, we can stay linked together and we can continue to operate in the best ways possible. There's been several new initiatives over the last 2 years to launch a series of health access points across the community with very intentional focus on communities that have been traditionally furthest from access and opportunity. So there's a youth health access point and one for people who use substances and one for trans folks and one for a variety of communities that we're really trying to invest better resources. And then just to say that San Francisco AIDS Foundation has throughout our programmatic surface always really dedicated our time and energy to partnerships around public policy and advocacy, both on the local, state, and federal level. And so we continue to advocate for the rights and dignity and access for all of these communities every day. But we're also very open to hearing from folks all the time about areas that we can strengthen that work. And the best way that I can encourage folks to get involved in a variety of those issues is to go to San Francisco AIDS Foundation's website and look up our HIV advocacy network and get involved through the updates that we can provide there or ways that you can mobilize.
Thank you, Tyler. Yeah, I mean, and you know, AIDS Foundation and San Francisco Community Health Center work so closely together, and my colleague Xander knows this, but you know, it's folks like Xander actually who are working on the front lines, who get all of this and are parts of these communities. We hire from the community, the sex worker community, the substance use community, the homeless community, the HIV community, the trans community, and so at San Francisco Community Health Center, like Honey was saying, you know, we're operating the Taman Bhutan Navigation Center. We have 64 beds filled. We're trying to get more beds in there so that trans and gender nonconforming folks have a place to lay their head when they need it. Right now, if that happens, we can get somebody in there. We have Trans Thrive, our community center up on Pine Street, that is a safe space, a resource space run by trans folks that is there. It's a resource center. It's a beautiful space so that folks can get anything and everything they need. We work alongside Tyler's organization, the AIDS Foundation, because it's not just about that. We have to make sure that we're going above and beyond. So our health center provides gender affirming care, medical, dental, behavioral, but beyond that, really, it's actually right now in San Francisco, we can't take anything for granted. We work closely with Honey and your team at the Office of Trans Initiatives, but we have a new mayor-elect coming in. We have actually a new board of supervisors in D5 and in D3. And so D3 is where our Trans Thrive Center is. D5 is where our Polk Street headquarters is. And actually, we have a lot of work to do to make sure that we are, all of our elected officials in San Francisco are by our side and protecting the communities we care about.
Yeah, and I would have, 3 years ago, I would have been, I'm not sure, but Xander, you know that we have used our platform. We have recognized people in the sex work industry. We've given them a platform. We've made them grand marshals. We are a sex positive queer community organization, and we do take that as a responsibility to make sure that we have people on our board that represent everyone in the community and that they're bringing issues like that and honoring people that we should.
And I would just add as well, you know, actively we work to decriminalize sex work, making things more accessible to everyone. Some of the work, you know, the cases that we take, we try very hard to take the type of cases that not everyone will take. And that means, you know, a lot of times there's a way where folks try to find a plaintiff that they feel like will just be really palatable to someone. And that's not something that's for us. Like, we really try to make sure that it doesn't help us to get to LGBTQ equality if the precedents we set don't work for people because they're also experiencing racism. And so, you know, a lot of our cases are the first of its kind. You know, one of our cases, the first person received gender affirming care while in prison, and that was one of our clients. So we actively work to make sure that we're highlighting the most underrepresented. And again, what that means is that we have to find the folks that are experiencing the highest levels of marginalization and to lift those folks up. And I think we should challenge our organizations to do that, but also to recognize that our organizations are being led by different people too, and we're doing different things. And I think that's something that's really exciting as well.
Thank you all so much. Let's give a big round of applause for Lance Thoma, Imani Rupert Gordon, Dr. Tyler Tamir, Suzanne Ford of San Francisco Pride, and of course, Honey Mahogany, which I always never really give all your titles because it's an incredibly long list. But thank you for all that you do. The Office of Transgender Initiatives, which I should mention, by the way, is also recognizing Transgender Immigrant Day today. Had a wonderful press release that happened at City Hall, and then tonight doing a community dinner. While we were getting set up for our last and final panel, I did finally, find some words this evening because of all the energy in this room and from our speakers. And so I want to thank you. One of my biggest regrets throughout the Harris Walz campaign was not speaking much more publicly. It actually was Kamala Harris during the first Trump administration who helped my wife and I. We're a binational couple. She's from Thailand and decided to get married in 2017 during that first Trump term, in which what Okan was talking about, like a lot of the applications going into backlog, like that was us. And when she finally got her documents, she was misgendered. And so when we asked for the UCI USCIS people to, hey, make the correction. They were like, it's not our fault, it's your fault. I don't know. I was so scared because it was also the year that COVID came down and she was already in Thailand. And I really thought that I would never see her again. By the way, she's right here. It's been an incredible ride with this person, but the elected leader who helped us out and with a pen of a stroke was Kamala Harris, who said, y'all made the mistake, get her documents ASAP. And within 5 days, she got her documents, and whew, thank goodness. And I probably should have been way more vocal about Kamala Harris. It is one of my biggest regrets. Fast forward, that whole situation, what it did for us, we went on to become advocates to the world. Then, we went to Thailand and we advocated for marriage equality. And then, it passed. And we had this grand big idea. We're going to go spend some time in that part of the world and we're going to spread LGBTQIA plus initiatives and all this goodness to other countries. Like we're going to free our world here. And that quickly came crashing down November 5th. I put all my eggs in one basket. I will say starting November 6th, though, I've never been so popular with cisgender moms, straight moms around the country who are now asking me, I have queer kids, what do I do? And that's when, in my despair, I decided, that is my calling. I know what you can do. And I got a laundry list of organizations who have been doing the work that you can give money to right now, that you can call right now, that your kid could be serviced and supported and loved by them, which they more than likely already have reached out before you did. And so I stand here today in our final panel that is focused on the transgender, gender nonconforming, gender variant, gender diverse community and their families, including parents, and also the conversation around gender affirming care, in which we know that this administration obviously, I can't find the words now, has like an obsession with. Dangerous obsession. So I'll let this panel take you home. I would like to introduce to you Gael Lala Chavez, who is the executive director of Lyric. Also Liz Trujillo, who is from Arizona and also a parent of a transgender youth or transgender child. And also Ingrid Jensen, who is our youth speaker. And last but not least, Dr. Alexis Petra of Trans Clinique, who is providing telehealth for the transgender community wherever she can, really, throughout the states, even if it is, quote unquote, being banned. Let's welcome our last and final panel.
Let's kind of close the conversation. We've had so many great conversations about everything. I mean, I think we've talked about the hard truth. We've talked about how our Wednesday looked like. And then I think the last panel really gave us a little bit of a guide of like, what does the next 4 years will look like for us? What I wanted to envision for this next panel was just to really anchor one of our most marginalized communities that we've been under attack for so long, and that is our young people, our trans and gender nonconforming young people, and those that love them, their parents. And I think there's this huge misconception that there are some grown-ups out there that are abandoning their children. And Michelle could just tell you, like, I've been in phone calls nonstop with parents, aunts, uncles, saying like, how can I support my young person? What do we do? And so I'm so honored to sit here with you all, have a conversation with both of you, along with Lisette, for us to take this conversation home. How are we going to show up for young people? what is it that young people are going to need? And in particular, when we're talking about gender affirming care, which is life-saving, what can we do collectively as service providers and as a community to ensure that this life-saving service doesn't go, continues to show up for our young people? So with that, let's do an easy question. Why don't you introduce yourself, your name and your pronouns, and if you could just tell us, like, what has the last 2 weeks been like, for you? And why don't we start with you?
Okay. Fine. I'm Dr. Alexis Petra. Many of you know me. I'm the founder and CEO of Trans Clinique. We started with my friend Sam in 2020, in April 2020, right around COVID. And we provide hormone replacement therapy in 27 states. And that's a lot of states, and it includes some states that don't like us very much. But we continue to do so. What was the first question? And she, her pronouns. Yes.
If you can share just what the last 2 weeks have been like for you.
The last 2 weeks, there's been a lot of anxiety in terms of my patients. They want to stock up on hormones. Most people are asking me for a lifetime supply of hormones before January 6th. So I don't know if I can exactly do that, but there's been a lot of, honestly, I've spent 2 or 3 hours out of my day, midnight, I'm typing letters to get name changes and letters of, to get ID changes and things like that before Trump gets sworn in, because that may or may not be easier or possible. So I've been spending a lot of time doing that. It's been a lot of anxiety with the patients. Personally, I feel that hoping for the best, but prepared for the worst. And I think being a private organization, a relatively small organization, I think we can continue on and provide care for everyone. I don't foresee losing anybody. And, I'm pretty brazen about that, I guess.
Thank you. Lisette, can you hear us okay? Awesome. Do you mind introducing yourself? Tell us, I'm curious what the last 2 weeks have been for you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisette Trujillo. My pronouns are she, her, ella, and I am based in Tucson, Arizona. I am the mother of a trans child. And the last 2 weeks have been sort of chaotic, with phone calls with families. We held a name change clinic on Saturday. It's all about helping people feel that they are being supported by community, while also reminding them, at least for us in Arizona, that we've organized under Trump and Ducey at the same time, and we're just back to being a red state. And so what is that work going to look like moving forward? If I can just share briefly, just because Imani Rupert was on the stage,
yes.
NCLR helped our parent community significantly over the years to try to stop bad policy and or help us challenge structural systems that were impacting our children. Saf Orr, who used to be one of the litigators with NCLR, I remember responding to an email I had sent that said, we've tried these different other legal organizations. Everyone says that trans kids don't win these cases, but I'm hoping you'll consider. And I remember his response was, we believe that we can, and that trans children do win these kinds of cases, and took us on. And so I think in this moment, it's important for us to stay anchored in that we've done this hard work before and we've experienced gains, and that we're just going to have to roll up our sleeves all over again, right? And so that's where I am right now.
Thank you so much. Indigo.
Hi, I'm Indigo. Pronouns are they, them. I suppose I'm a community advocate and a representative of the youths, as it were. Yeah. For the last 2 weeks, I've felt and I've seen my community feel a lot of fear and anxiety. There's a lot of uncertainty. Promises have been made pretty clearly, but how far will they go with them? We don't know. Will we have access to hormones? By the way, can I get a lifetime supply of hormones? Love that.
Absolutely.
We're going to have that talk right after this.
Yeah. You got the hookup? No, but unironically, yes, people are really worried about will they be able to get hormones over the next few years if there's interruptions on the federal level as have been promised. I work with folks who are people of color. I know folks who are experiencing homelessness. People are really afraid of what comes next because it really feels like a lot of elected officials are looking for someone to throw under the bus right now. And if I'm being honest, our homeless community is kind of already been thrown under the bus. And if funding gets pulled, I would not be shocked if that's a place that gets hit. And that would be not great for our community, given that queer and especially trans people are disproportionately likely to experience homelessness in their lives.
That's right. So in the last couple of weeks, I've had conversations with parents and with young people, and many of them, some themes kind of came up, and one of them was, how do I secure gender affirming care for my child or for myself? That was a big one. And how do we do it from now until January 20th? The next one was, I don't even know what to do when you say roll up your sleeves, but I know I have to do something and I have to do it quickly. What does that even look like? What is a first step? And then the third one was just wellness and mental health. And that's just so prevalent. This idea of I'm extremely concerned for my child's emotional well-being and their friends. For young people, I'm concerned for my friends. How do we create this space of community and mutual aid? And so I'm just wondering if you all could, speak a little bit about how this kind of resonates with you and what you would tell somebody in the audience or somebody, that's getting live stream that is just wanting to do any of those things. Secure gender affirming care, or potentially maybe getting involved in advocacy, or if they feel like what is more interesting for them is building community. How would they even start? Lisette, why don't we start with you?
Unfortunately, I have to remind people that are living in red states that January is around the corner and legislative session is going to begin. And so while we're panicking around what will happen at the federal level, the onslaught of anti-trans legislation is not going to stop at the state level. And so I think for me personally, the most important thing was how can I be of service in this moment? And so it's always been in the organizing space. And so policy organizing was really important for me, helping organize families to testify against anti-trans legislation. Currently, there's a few of us that will be going to the ACLU SCOTUS rally and being in front of the Supreme Court to show that there are supportive families and communities who believe that trans youth should and deserve to have access to gender affirming care. I think community is vital in this moment. There's so much that can be done when we gather together and we fill the gaps for what's needed for the people that we love in our families and in our communities. And I know that it's not tangible, right? Like I can tell you, like, go volunteer with, the different equality organizations in your state, help create a messaging deck for how to combat anti-trans messaging, make sure that you're volunteering your time within these organizations, and make sure to donate to legal organizations that are going to be putting, stop measures in the courts as bad federal policy rolls out. I think those are like tangible, right? But also, if we're already ensuring that we are in community, then as the Trump administration begins to roll things out, we can actually come together more quickly with mutual aid resources and a better pathway together on how to stop what's happening, right? There's so many unknowns, though, that it's hard to say, here's step A through C.
Yeah, if I can say something on mutual aid, which is something I will always advocate for. I will always say do mutual aid when you can, wherever you can. It doesn't have to be super organized either. First of all, you can look up your neighborhood. There's probably folks doing mutual aid that you can go and help out with. Just generally a good thing to do. Also, you can just help your immediate community. Find an affinity group or just your chosen family. Share meals with them. Share resources with them. Within the trans community, it's pretty common for folks to be like, hey, I don't have hormones for this week. Can I borrow a shot? Can I borrow a shot's worth of hormones from you? Keep doing that, folks. That is how we survive. Getting mutual aid goes very far because it is resilient, because it is very difficult to attack. You can't cut our funding if we don't have funding, y'all. What federal funds? We don't get any. But I also want to stress that mutual aid and more formal organizations and nonprofits can and should work together. We are stronger when we work together, when we embrace a diversity of tactics.
1,000%. See, y'all, this is why we wanted a young person on this panel.
Well, I'm not particularly young, but I agree that sticking together and having a common goal is the way to go. And infighting is the worst thing we can do right now. Helping each other out, whether it be resources, things like that, is definitely extremely important right now. I do fear for trans children, meaning 15 and under, getting care. I think that's going to be very difficult in states that are red states, frankly. And I think that's going to be dangerous for providers, and I think, that's going to be a challenge. But, San Francisco is a beacon, California in general, really, and I think it's always going to be available here, and I can't imagine that it will not. Again, Trans Clinique is a private institution. We don't receive any federal funding. We do receive donations, GoFundMe, whatever you want to do to help is fine. And we give free care that way. But we are very active in Florida, Alabama, Georgia, things like that. And we're helping people there. And again, we're small enough to kind of fly under the radar, please. Well, hopefully this doesn't get too far out there. But things have already been in the works in terms of Project 25 or the Republican agenda, and we're already kind of fighting against it. I don't know how much worse it's going to get. But again, I'm hoping for Trump's incompetence and him focusing on other things.
One of the things that has come up is this, crunched timeline from now until January 20th to kind of protect young people and their families. So I'm just curious, because I really want to make sure that we're kind of hone in on resources, if possible, if Could you kind of walk us through just really quickly, what do you think are the most important things that a trans non-binary young person should be doing from now until January 20th in terms of legal documentation, or their families? I know, Lisette, you were talking about certain workshops or that you were already doing. I'm just curious, because I've been hearing that everywhere, and I'm just curious if you're seeing that across the country as well, of this like really quick timeline to get all of our paperwork ready before January 20th.
You know, online I was seeing promotions for different name change clinics in different states. So organizations, different trans organizations went into full like get your identity documents settled mode, right? So we had a name change clinic here as well. NCLR helped us in Arizona win a lawsuit that now allows trans youth to get their gender markers updated on birth certificates, right? So that's finally accessible to our children. And my family, my husband and I, we lived in a multi-status home until he became a US citizen in 2018. And hearing the anti-immigrant rhetoric, the anti-trans rhetoric, and seeing Prop 314, which is like a show me your papers version of SB 1070, like a worse version of that. My family is personally preparing for like what we're going to need to carry with us in our state should someone pull us over and ask, right? And so there's all of these fears that people are having. And I think what I'm seeing online and what I'm hearing from families is identity documents are going to be essential before it's all sort of reversed and or taken away when this new administration comes through. And so I think updating identity documents is the most important thing to do in this moment. It allows families to travel if they need to get care in other places. There's just so many variables that we have to prepare for from here until then. What I will share is that my son is saying, that he understands safety and, getting documents in place and thinking about what healthcare is going to look like should it get banned. But he's also been echoing to me and anyone who will listen that this is when we must be visible and loud and showing up in love and support of one another. And so I just want to share that as a piece, right? That as communities, we really are going to need to show up in ways that we might not have felt brave enough or felt comfortable enough to do before. Especially for the families that exist in the intersections of immigration, race, for non-binary people who are their identity documents might never match, right? If they don't live in states where the X markers are available. And so there's just going to be all these ways in which we're going to need to just I know that this sounds really dumb, but I'm wearing a sweatshirt that says support your homies. And I really do feel like in this moment, we're going to need to be together and to be creative, right, with what's coming our way. And we know that our communities have faced worse. And so how do we learn from them and pull from them and become and take those lessons to keep our children safe moving forward?
I think we've talked a lot about today how San Francisco is and will continue to be this like beacon, sanctuary city and place of refuge for many that are coming outside. And we are anticipating a huge increase. I mean, Lyric alone this last year, about 40% of the young people we serve came from out of state. And so it's going to be a natural thing that we're going to start seeing more and more people from the outside community coming to San Francisco, and we're going to welcome them. My question is for, all of you, what does that look like for, people that are in red states right now? How can San Francisco put ourselves more out there so that a young person, a family member knows what are the resources and knows how to get to San Francisco or get to a clinic like yours? What does that look like?
Yeah, well, again, I see every day a lot of people in those types of places, red states, and I feel for them. And those are the ones that often have familial problems. The parents don't accept them, or they get kicked out of their house and things like that. So we do our best to provide free care, although it's not always possible because they're kind of stretched thin already. But yeah, I mean, it's every Tuesday we have Trans Tuesday, which is education and also a community support group on Zoom, and they can join and just kind of see the surgeons that give talks, or we talk amongst ourselves, and it's special, and they can see that they're not alone, and that's very important. And that's the number one thing is they're not unusual. They might be treated bad where they're at, but it's not like that everywhere. I wish I could just hug everybody and move everybody to a big compound here, but it's not possible. So I think, from my standpoint, sticking in my lane, just HRT, I do my best to get them the medications. And if it can't be at a Walgreens or a CVS there because of rules and laws, I can have it shipped safely, secretly, from a compound pharmacy, things like that.
Lisette, what does it look like? That question goes to you. What does that look like in Arizona and the Southwest?
I guess I want to share that Tucson was one of the first cities to have a citywide non-discrim in the 1970s. I believe it passed in 1976. And so our city was a safe haven and has been for many decades for people. And so I want to believe that I don't have to leave my home where I'm with my family and with our chosen family and community. I want to believe that I can stay here and fight, and that I should have a right to stay here and fight for the right for my child to exist safely in this state. And so that's why I keep reminding myself that I've organized under Trump before here. Immigrant groups have organized under Trump before here along the border. And we have seen the impacts we can make when we band together. And so I think what's really important is supporting families through mutual aid funds to travel back and forth, should that be what they want to do. I think it's sending financial resources to states where maybe it's access to care is not accessible. There's a multitude of ways in which we can help each other with financially and help each other access care without telling people that they have to uproot their lives and leave the homes that they love to move to better places. That is not democracy. That's not freedom. If we have to leave the people we love in the homes that we love in order to stay safe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I want to echo that, ideally, we want to be helping people where they are and not, obviously, safe haven, beacon, and all that. But if we can help people where they are, we really should be doing that, especially those of us that have access to a little more funding. Mutual aid can take place across state lines. But for a lot of folks will still be coming here as functionally refugees from within the United States. Even under our current administration, I know people of all ages who've come here fleeing all kinds of violence and hate and seeking medicine, because for a lot of folks, this living on the street in San Francisco is still safer than living in the closet in South Carolina. And we need to be ready to help and to support those people who come here. That's been a big part of my personal advocacy, is trying to help people who've come here with nothing, who wind up in shelters, struggling to just make ends meet, to get their to get access to healthcare, to get access to food. We're going to see more of that because I'm not surprised that so many of the folks of the clients at Lyric have come from out of state. I would expect that to go up over the next 4 years. It's going to be more people who need help.
So Indigo, I was going to ask you one question. Most of this room is a bunch of grown-ups. And when you were speaking about Daniel and Indigo, and what do you need from us, young people? Like, how do we show up for you? One of the things that I appreciate about young people is how bold and courageous and unapologetic you are. And that's what it's going to take. And so I'm just curious, like, you have this platform right now, hear people in the audience in person and also live streamed. What do you want to tell to older folks and how we show up for those in your community now and for the foreseeable future?
A lot. There's a lot we need. I guess to go on like the far end, the hopes, what people are really trying to get and fight for: economic reform, housing reform, healthcare reform. Like, on a structural level, we need better access to healthcare. We need to be able to get into housing. It's not enough to be helping the people who end up homeless and then to put them in shelters and maybe eventually some of them pass their needs assessment and get some kind of subsidized housing. We need to be keeping people in housing in the first place. We need to be getting people healthcare, both wherever they are in this process of living their lives. For young people especially, I think it's really important that people have help navigating the healthcare system. It's very complicated. I don't know how to navigate it. Please help. I have found help in trying to navigate it, but that was a lot. I didn't know that there were people who could help me navigate healthcare. That's not something that was clearly communicated to me until relatively recently in my life. It's a nebulous and confusing system, and a lot of people, especially those with disabilities, especially people who are neurodivergent, it is structurally organized to be difficult to navigate. And I think getting people healthcare, which is one of the main priorities of various nonprofits, is a huge step. I think helping people navigate that healthcare system is another big step. And especially when we're talking about trans youth, queer and trans youth, a lot of folks are going to be coming here. They're still going to be on their parents' insurance. So possibly not qualifying for Medi-Cal or all of it, some or all of it. And that is another hurdle to navigate. And I don't have the answers on how to do that. I've barely been able to help the people who I know with that. We, on a structural level, need to be doing better to help folks who are coming here and have health needs, have housing needs, have all kinds of needs. And, shelters are they're a halfway step. We need to be getting a lot stronger help for our community.
I'm curious, what keeps you grounded? Where do you find your strength? What gives you hope?
Well, for me personally, it's just my journey that hasn't been all that easy. When I first started transition, it was early 2000s, and there was very little support for trans, and very little role models, very little communication about trans in general. So it was a way different story than it is now. So I just take back, feed off of that struggle that I had and say this is just another kind of bump in the road. And that's where I get my strength, and it just from the hurdles that I had in my life and my journey.
I guess I'm hopeful in the sense that I truly believe that we can disrupt what's happening if there's enough of us willing to do it. But I feel really angry I know that you started this panel by saying that there are lots of loving parents, but I honestly feel outnumbered, because if you look at that electoral map and you look at the numbers of just like Arizona alone and how many trans youth live in our state, we know that their parents voted for Trump and voted against their own best interest and safety. I'm in a lot of parent spaces where I hear a lot of families talk about the fact that like they don't want to discuss politics, you know, their kids aren't part of this political debate. And so there's going to be a lot of culture shifting that's going to have to happen, because a trans youth's first ally is actually not showing up for them. It's not their parents. And so there's going to be so much work that's going to have to be done to combat the $215 million that was spent in anti-trans ads in the last 4 months. It's a well-funded money wheel by lobbies that are utilizing, this political debate to win elections. And so I feel angry, and I guess I'm using my anger to kind of think creatively about how do we disrupt parent support spaces that utilize assimilation tactics, which are tied to white supremacy, to hide their children. There's all these things that I'm seeing, like they have no racial context to understand the terms that they're using in parent support spaces. And so how do we disrupt that? How do we create a world where our children can live freely, without shame, and visibly, without fear of being discriminated against or harassed? Those are the things that are fueling me right now, that I'm thinking about, and I'm sure are maybe abstract. People want to be like, what is Lizette talking about? But one day I'll roll it out somewhere. It's just living in here about what is liberation going to look like for all trans youth, right? In spaces where parents are ill-equipped to even understand discrimination because they've never experienced it before.
Even though your answer, Lizette, was, you felt like it was disorganized, it was actually really structured, in my opinion. For me, what that said to me was I'm utilizing my anger and my frustration towards this exact strategy, which is parent support groups, which is absolutely the right thing that I feel like many parents should do. It's how do you get into these spaces where, quite frankly, a lot of young people can't be in? And so how do we utilize other parents as allies to actually sit in those uncomfortable spaces to advocate and be a true ally for not just your own child, but for every other child? So that was really directed. Thank you so much. That was great. Indigo, I want to close with you and see, if you could answer that same question.
Where I find strength in this time, I think first and foremost, my community. I have on so many occasions shown up to a queer space or a trans space, knowing one person, two people, or no one, and still been welcomed as part of the community, because that's what we do for each other. And I think fostering those spaces is critical. And that stems from a history of us supporting our community. And I would encourage looking into queer history and trans history. It is a very tragic history, but it also teaches a lesson that, hey, we've fought these battles before. We've done this already. Our ancestors have been fighting for years, and we can do it too. This is a setback. It doesn't have to be. This isn't a loss. This isn't the end. And I think remembering that is critical, remembering our history, respecting our ancestors who we can learn a great deal from, and continuing our cultural traditions of mutual aid and community support is something that gives me a lot of hope for our future.
Thank you so much, Lizette, Indigo, Doctor. Thank you so much for being here with us. And I hope we can I believe we're all going to be doing this together. I'm fueled up.
Yes. Another big round of applause for all of our speakers to bring us home.
My name is Jace. I use they, them pronouns for those on the screen. I'm a white person with long hair smiling into a room of people looking for grounding.
Hi, my name's Sid Simpson. I'm a co-founder of the Trans Caucus of the Milk Club. I will be recruiting all of you in the reception, and I'm on stage for loving moral support.
In this moment, I want to reflect a little bit deeper on the question that Gail posed at the end. How do we ground ourselves? To me, for trans people, it's obvious. We know who we are. Every day we show up to life grounding ourselves in our community, choosing our family, fighting for our rights, and loving ourselves in a way that society and the world could not fathom. But for those in this moment looking for grounding, I ask you for a moment to close your eyes. Close your eyes and imagine yourself in a forest. Specifically, we're in California. Imagine yourself in a redwood forest. The mutual aid that Indigo speaks of is all around you. Imagine your roots anchoring you deep out into the forest. Not alone and isolated, but stretching out, tying into community, tying into the mushroom fibers that allow for nutrients to expand to different organisms within this ecosystem. As you stretch up, imagine your treetops. The tallest trees in the world are harvesting water from the fog and sharing it with the plants inches down below. In this moment, there's a lot of uncertainty for many of us, but for others, we stay grounded, we stay rooted. How else can we expect to survive if we are not connecting with those around us, sharing those resources that so many of us have in abundance? It's on us to fight against those for-profit pharma companies that are demanding our children decide when they can get access to the healthcare they need now. It's on us to decide and to fight against the corporations that are denying workers their dues. It's even on us to perhaps have conversations with those in our own circles who we feel challenged by. As so many of us have offered, it's on us as well to listen as much as it is to give. I hope that you stay grounded in the fight to come, but it's in those networks that we will survive. Connect to those networks now. Share your resources in ways that challenge you. Practice the care that you know yourself capable of. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
So before we get to Dr. Marcy Edelman, I'm going to introduce a special guest here to represent the HIV aging Latinx community. Juan, would you like to join us just for quick remarks?
Thank you. She gave me 2 minutes. So the reason why am I here, right? I'm a Latino. I am gay. I am disabled. I am an HIV long-term survivor that has been here for almost 40 years. And every part of me has been insulted by this new president, old President Trump, and I'm saying his name. So every part of me keeps fighting for us. But I want to tell you something very fast because it did happen to me in a minute. So I'm part of this beautiful project called the Human Library. And I became a book. I am an HIV long-term survivor. So I went to my first time that I was speaking, and suddenly the librarian, the person in charge, he say, I don't know if you will be willing, but there is a guy outside that wants to read your book, means me, and he has a MAGA hat. And I say, sure. So, of course, I was afraid. And even in a moment that he was right there with me, he was teasing me. He said, so what did you think about this? And he was pointing at the hat. And I say, you're trying for me to define you because of your hat. But you didn't ask me for what do you think about my pants or my lips or anything else. So he said, yeah, you're right. And at the end of this conversation, we had a wonderful conversation. And he left this note, and I don't even know how it happened, but he left this note saying, "This is the best book that I had read before." And all what I want to tell you with these guys is that sometimes, somehow, it is possible that we can communicate, because that's what I heard also from some other people. We need to learn to communicate with the other people that we don't understand or we feel they don't understand us. And to all the agencies and organizations, I'll say, yeah, go and work and go there with Ella and be there with the Latinas transgenders, or go there with the senior services, or go there with all these people and interact. We have problems, but we can be better than that. So Tolkien just and recognizing the Asian and our elders and the advocates and everybody here. So thank you, love you, Mercy. And thank you, Michelle.
Okay, we are getting to our final closing act, and food is here, so I'm free to be able to declare that. I want to thank you first and foremost for all of you who joined us here at the Commonwealth Club World Affairs of California, a nonpartisan organization dedicated to finding the truth. Our mission is the truth and sharing our lived experiences here, and topics and conversations around civic engagement and civic dialogue of our time. I'm Michelle Miao, a member of the Board of Governors for the Commonwealth Club World Affairs, and I really want to thank you and all of our partners for being here tonight. I'm going to list our partners, and I'm going to do the best. I remember them all because they're incredible people who are doing the most incredible work. Thank you to San Francisco Pride, who has been there for over 50 years every year in giving us spirit. Thank you to Lyric. Thank you to Roma Guy and also Annie Rivera for doing our welcome. Thank you to the San Francisco AIDS Foundation, to NCLR, to Lavender Phoenix, to the Center of Immigration Protection, LGBTQ Asylum, Parivar Bay Area, and also thank you to the San Francisco AIDS Foundation and also the San Francisco Community Health Center. Thank you to Honey Mahogany. Thank you to Nicole Santamaria for moderating a beautiful discussion. Immigration will be the backbone. I think the foundation attests to all of us in terms of the freedom for all. And Nicole represents Ella Barra Trans Latina. I think I got everyone. Thank you to NCLR. And so to join me on stage, I'd like to welcome Dr. Marcy Edelman. A long time advocate contributor, not because of OLD, but OLE. And also who has established one of the first LGBTQ senior elder organizations out there, and housing, we know housing is a right. So Dr. Edelman, take us home before we go out there and network and love each other and hug each other and continue the work.
Oh, wow. Can you hear me all right? Yeah. Well, I don't know. I am exhausted. I'm inspired. I'm energized. I want to thank Michelle Miao for putting on this event. This is just what I needed. Is it just what you needed? Yes. Whoa. And I think what we heard, and I think what we all know, is that it's community, 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 and that we have to be kind and there for each other through this time, and that we've been there for each other in ways that have won us our rights all these years because we've done it together. But this time around, it's very important that we not circle the wagons, that we reach out, that while we take care of ourselves and fight for ourselves, we join with other people and engage with them with human rights of all kinds. And that is the way to winning back our lives again and our rights. And I know we can do that. I have no doubt whatsoever. So, but what I want you to do right now is I want you to stand up. Yeah, stand up. And kind of shake a little bit, because we've been here a long time. A long time. And I want you to hold the hand of the people to your right and the people to your left. And take a look at who they are. That's right, turn the lights up. Look into their eye. And acknowledge them with a smile. And then when I say now, what I want you to do is I want you to take 3 deep breaths in unison. And we're going to start with an inhale and an exhale. And with each breath, I want you to think about how kind and respectful we are going to be with each other and with our allies. And we're going to build a new tomorrow. Are you ready? Yes. Now. Wonderful. Thank you.